My daughter Sarah stood at her $80,000 wedding reception, holding a champagne glass I paid for, and told 200 guests that her broke fathers finally did something right by staying out of her way. I sat there in my $40 thrift store suit, watching her laugh as the crowd joined in. She had no idea I owned the venue. You won't believe what I did next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The microphone squealed as Sarah adjusted it, her white dress flowing like expensive silk around her feet. Every thread of that dress, every flower in her bouquet, every candle flickering on those mahogany tables. I had paid for all of it, anonymously, through my lawyer, because I wanted my little girl to have the perfect wedding day. I want to thank everyone who made this day possible. Sarah's voice carried across the ballroom, her smile radiant under the crystal chandelier. My amazing husband Derek, who works so hard for our future. My mother-in-law Patricia, who flew in from California. The whole wedding planning team who made my dreams come true. I shifted in my chair at the back table, the one they'd assigned me to, away from family, away from the photographs, away from anything that mattered. And I guess I should thank my dad, too, Sarah continued, and my heart lifted for just a moment, for finally learning to stay in his lane. It's not easy having a broke father when you're trying to build something beautiful, but at least he dressed appropriately today and didn't embarrass us. The laughter started small, rippling through the crowd like a cruel wave. Derek's groomsmen chuckled first, then Derek himself, his face splitting into that smirk I'd grown to despise. Sarah's college friends joined in, their perfectly manicured hands covering their mouths as they giggled. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching Sarah's face as she said it. The way her eyes found mine across the room, not with shame or apology but with satisfaction, like she'd finally put me in my place. Like calling her father broke in front of 200 people was some kind of victory. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger but from something deeper, something that felt like grief. Dad always said family comes first. Sarah raised her glass higher, and tonight he proved it by staying quiet and letting us celebrate without any drama. So here's to keeping things simple and staying in your lane. The applause was thunderous. I watched my daughter's new husband lean over and kiss her cheek, whispering something that made her laugh again. I watched her bridesmaids toast with champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on groceries in a month. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there in my thrift store suit, feeling like a stranger at my own daughter's wedding. The elderly woman next to me, someone's great aunt, leaned over and patted my hand. Don't mind her, dear. Young people don't understand that money isn't everything. If only she knew. I pulled my phone from my jacket pocket and scrolled to Margaret Chen's number. My lawyer, my friend, the only person who knew the truth about my finances. Margaret, I said quietly when she answered, stepping outside onto the venue's marble terrace. It's Bob. I need you to prepare some papers. How did the wedding go? Her voice was warm, familiar. I looked back through the glass doors at my daughter, now dancing with Derek under lights I had purchased, in a ballroom I was currently leasing. Exactly as I expected, I said. Sarah made her position very clear tonight. I'm sorry, Bob. I know you hoped. Don't be sorry, I interrupted, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Clarity is a gift. I finally know where I stand with my daughter. I could hear Margaret's pen clicking on the other end of the line. She'd been my lawyer for 15 years. She knew what that tone meant. What do you need me to prepare? I watched Sarah throw her head back, laughing at something Derek said, her happiness genuine and complete. She looked beautiful. She looked successful. She looked like someone who had everything she wanted. But she didn't know about the envelope in my jacket pocket, the one that would change everything. We'll discuss it Monday, I said. But Sarah wants independence from her embarrassing father. I think it's time I gave her exactly what she's asking for. I hung up and walked back inside, past the ice sculptures I'd funded, past the 7-piece orchestra I'd hired, past the dessert table that cost more than most people's monthly salary. I found my coat and headed toward the exit. Sarah didn't notice me leaving. She was too busy dancing, too busy celebrating, too busy enjoying her perfect wedding day. The same wedding day I had given her anonymously because I loved her. The same wedding day where she had publicly called me broke and embarrassing. As I drove home in my 15-year-old Honda Civic, I made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. For 30 years, I let my family believe I was just a retired factory worker living on Social Security. The truth? I owned 17 rental properties and had $2.3 million sitting in accounts Sarah couldn't even pronounce. The lie started after Linda died 5 years ago. My wife, my partner, my best friend, she'd helped me build our little empire quietly, one property at a time. We'd started with a duplex in 1985, fixing it up ourselves on weekends. Linda would hold the flashlight while I rewired outlets, and I'd sand floors while she picked out paint colors from clearance bins. "We don't need to look rich, Bob," Linda used to say, watching me count rental income at our kitchen table. "We just need to be smart." By the time she passed, we owned properties across 3 counties, shopping centers, apartment buildings, rental houses that generated more income in a month than most people made in a year. Linda had also convinced me to invest early in Microsoft, Apple, Amazon stocks that people laughed at back then. After her funeral, I made a choice. I would live modestly and see who loved Bob Mitchell the person versus Bob Mitchell the bank account. Sarah failed that test every single day. "Dad, you really need to update your wardrobe," she'd say when I picked her up in my old Honda. "People see us together. It reflects on Derek's career." "Dad, maybe you should move to a smaller apartment. That neighborhood is getting rough." Never mind that I owned 3 buildings on that same street. "Dad, you're 72. Don't you think you should be more responsible with money instead of buying lottery tickets?" I'd never bought a lottery ticket in my life. She just saw me withdraw cash and assumed. Emma, my younger daughter, never cared about any of it. When she called from her army base in Germany, she asked about my health, my happiness, my garden. She asked about the neighbors and whether I was eating enough vegetables. She never once asked about money, but Sarah measured every conversation in dollars. When Derek proposed, her first call wasn't to share her joy. It was to ask if I could contribute something meaningful to the wedding. "I know you don't have much, Dad, but this is important. Derek's family has expectations." I could have written them a check for the full amount that day. Instead, I worked with Margaret to pay anonymously through a catering contract, a venue discount, a mysterious benefactor who wanted to support young love. I wanted to give Sarah her dream wedding without her knowing it came from her broke father. But that wasn't the worst thing she did. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sarah came to my apartment with a list of requirements, not requests, requirements. "Dad, I need you to understand something. Derek's family is very refined. His mother, Patricia, is in real estate development. His father owns medical practices. We need you to dress appropriately." She handed me a piece of paper with detailed instructions. What colors to avoid, where to sit, when to arrive and when to leave. I know this sounds harsh, but this day isn't about you. It's about me and Derek starting our life together. I need you to stay in the background. I read her list quietly. Sit at the back. Don't initiate conversations with Derek's family. Don't mention your job history. Mead, it's embarrassing. Don't bring a guest. Don't expect to be in family photos. "Sarah," I said finally, "why did you even invite me?" She looked surprised by the question. "You're my father. Of course you're invited. I just need you to behave." Behave, like I was a child who might throw a tantrum. "I'll be there," I told her, "and I'll follow your rules." She smiled then, the first genuine smile she'd given me in months. "Thank you, Dad. You'll see, Mrs.'s wedding is going to change everything for us." She was right about that. I spent the week before her wedding walking through my properties, collecting rent checks from 17 different buildings. I met with Margaret to review my investment portfolio. I approved repairs on the shopping center, signed leases for new tenants, authorized a expansion on the apartment complex downtown. Then I went home to my modest one-bedroom apartment, heated up a frozen dinner, and watched the evening news on a television I'd bought in 2003. That night I made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The next morning Sarah called me screaming. The wedding venue had sent her a thank you card addressed to me, with a bill breakdown showing every penny I'd paid. "What the hell is this?" Sarah's voice cracked through my phone before I'd even finished saying hello. I was sitting at my kitchen table drinking coffee from a mug Emma had sent me from Germany. The morning light filtered through my thin curtains, highlighting the stack of bills I'd been organizing: property taxes, insurance premiums, maintenance invoices, the paperwork of wealth I'd kept hidden for years. "Good morning to you too, Sarah." "Don't good morning me, Dad. I have a card here that says you paid for my entire wedding. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the band, everything. Is this some kind of mistake?" I set down my coffee slowly. Margaret had warned me this might happen. One careless secretary, one mislabeled envelope, and 30 years of careful secrecy could unravel in a moment. "It's not a mistake." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear Derek's voice in the background, sharp and demanding, but I couldn't make out the words. "You paid for my wedding." Sarah's voice wasn't grateful. It wasn't amazed. It was angry. "You let me plan everything, stress about money, cut corners on things I wanted, and you were secretly paying for it the whole time. I wanted you to have the wedding you dreamed of. By lying to me, by making me look like an idiot." "But that wasn't the worst thing," she said. Derek grabbed the phone. I could hear the rustle as it changed hands, could picture him standing in their pristine kitchen, his jaw tight with the kind of anger that comes from wounded pride. "Bob, what kind of game are you playing here?" "I'm not playing any games, Derek." "Bullshit. You sit there in your cheap suit, acting like you're barely scraping by, and then we find out you've been funding Sarah's wedding like some kind of secret sugar daddy." The phrase made my stomach turn. "I'm her father." "You're embarrassing her. Do you understand that? Sarah spent months telling people her dad was on a tight budget, that we were keeping costs down because of your situation. Now they're going to think we lied." "You didn't lie. You didn't know." "That's the problem." Derek's voice climbed higher. "You made us look like fools. If you had money, why didn't you just give it to us directly? Why the games?" Sarah took the phone back. When she spoke, her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Dad, I'm embarrassed. People are going to think I needed your help. They're going to think I couldn't afford my own wedding." "You couldn't afford your own wedding, Sarah. The venue alone cost more than you make in 6 months." "That's not the point." Her words came fast, clipped. "The point is, you made me look bad. You made me look dependent. Derek and I work hard for what we have, and you ruined it." I sat there listening to my daughter explain why her father's gift was actually an insult, how helping her achieve her dreams was somehow cruel, how loving her enough to sacrifice my own comfort was embarrassing. "I wanted to give you something beautiful," I said quietly. "Then you should have been honest about it. You should have told me you had money instead of letting me believe you were broke. Do you know how many times I felt sorry for you? How many times I worried about you living alone in that crappy apartment?" My throat tightened. "You worried about me?" "Of course I worried, but apparently I was worried about nothing, since you're secretly rich or whatever this is." Derek's voice came from the background again, and Sarah covered the phone to respond. I heard muffled arguing, heated whispers, the sound of papers shuffling. When Sarah came back on the line, her voice had changed again. Harder now, more certain. "This doesn't change anything between us, Dad. Money doesn't fix the fact that you've always been an embarrassment. It just means you're an embarrassment with a bank account." The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen for a long time after that, staring at the phone in my hand. Outside, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson was watering her flowers, the same ritual she'd performed every morning for the 8 years I'd lived here. Her husband called to her from their porch, something about breakfast being ready. Simple lives, honest lives. Lives where people said what they meant and meant what they said. I picked up the phone and dialed Margaret's number. "Margaret, it's Bob. Sarah found out about the wedding payment." "Oh no. How did she take it?" I looked around my modest apartment, the second-hand furniture I'd chosen deliberately, the generic art prints I'd bought at a discount store, the life I'd constructed to test my daughter's love. She called me an embarrassment with a bank account. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Bob." "Don't be." I stood up and walked to the window, watching Mrs. Patterson's careful attention to her garden. "I finally have clarity. What do you want me to do?" I told Margaret to prepare the papers. Sarah wanted to be independent. I was about to grant her wish permanently. Sarah invited me to Sunday dinner 3 weeks later, not to apologize, but to ask for $50,000 for Derek's business opportunity. She served me leftovers while she and Derek ate steak. The invitation came through a text message on a Tuesday afternoon. "Dad, can you come for dinner Sunday? Derek and I want to discuss something with you. 6 p.m. No apology for hanging up on me. No acknowledgement of the cruel things she'd said. Just a summons like I was an employee being called into the boss's office. I should have declined. Part of me knew it was a trap, another test of my usefulness rather than my worth. But I went anyway because, despite everything, she was still my daughter. Their house sat in a development where every lawn looked identical and every driveway held matching SUVs. Sarah had bought it 3 years ago with a down payment I'd provided anonymously through a first-time buyer's grant that Margaret had arranged. Sarah believed she'd won a lottery of sorts, a windfall that proved her luck was finally changing. Standing on their porch that Sunday evening, I could see the life they'd built. The expensive wreath on the door, the security system panel blinking green, the landscaping that cost more than most people's annual vacations. Derek answered the door wearing a golf shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Bob, come in, come in." His handshake was firm, performative. "Sarah's just finishing up in the kitchen." The house smelled like garlic and rosemary. Good smells. Expensive smells. I followed Derek through their living room, past furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Everything was beige and cream and perfectly coordinated. "Sarah's become quite the chef," Derek said, leading me toward their dining room. "You should see what she's making for us tonight. Us, not you. Not the family. Us meaning Derek and Sarah." I was clearly the outsider being welcomed into their world. Sarah emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 plates. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, some kind of potato dish that had been carefully plated like restaurant food. She set them down at 2 place settings, then disappeared back into the kitchen. She returned with a 3rd plate, leftover pot roast, cold green beans, and what looked like instant mashed potatoes from a box. "Sorry, Dad, I didn't have enough of the good stuff for 3 people, she said, setting the plate down at the 3rd chair. "But you don't mind, right? You're not picky." Derek was already cutting into his steak, the knife gliding through meat that was perfectly pink in the center. Sarah poured wine for herself and Derek from a bottle that still had a price tag on it. $28. She didn't offer me any. So Derek said after we'd eaten in uncomfortable silence for several minutes, "Sarah and I have been talking about expanding our horizons." I looked up from my cold pot roast. "Oh? We're entrepreneurs, Bob. Always looking for the next opportunity." Derek leaned back in his chair, his wine glass nearly empty already. "And we've found something really exciting." Sarah's face was bright with the kind of enthusiasm I remembered from her childhood, when she'd get excited about a new toy or a school project. "It's a food truck, Dad, but not just any food truck. A gourmet one. Derek has this amazing business plan." Derek pulled out a folder thick with papers and charts. "The profit margins are incredible. We've identified the perfect locations, done all the market research. Food trucks are the future of dining, Bob. Low overhead, high mobility, enormous profit potential." He spread the papers across the table like he was conducting a business meeting. Revenue projections, location maps, photographs of other food trucks, articles about the mobile dining revolution. It's going to be called Derek's Delights, Sarah added. Isn't that perfect? I studied their presentations, their excitement, their carefully prepared pitch. How much does a food truck cost? That's the beautiful part, Derek said. The startup costs are minimal compared to a traditional restaurant. We're talking about maybe $50,000 to get everything up and running. The truck, the equipment, permits, initial inventory. $50,000? Exactly. And with our business model, we'll have that paid back within 18 months. After that, it's pure profit. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It was the first affectionate gesture she'd made toward me since the wedding. Dad, this could change everything for Derek and me. We could finally have the kind of financial security we've been working toward. But that wasn't the worst thing, she said. Derek leaned forward, his eyes bright with the kind of desperation that comes from wanting something you can't afford. Here's the thing, Bob. Sarah told me about your resources. We know you've been modest about your situation, but we also know you've got more flexibility than you let on. Flexibility. Right. And we thought, what better investment than your daughter's future? This isn't charity, Bob. This is business. We'd pay you back with interest. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. Dad, you've never really been able to help with anything before. Now you finally can. You can finally be useful to your family. Useful. Like I was a tool they'd discovered in their garage. What kind of timeline are you thinking about? I asked. Derek's smile widened. Well, the opportunity won't wait forever. We need to move fast. We could probably use the money by next week. Next week? The food truck business moves quickly, Sarah explained. If we wait too long, someone else will grab the good locations. I set down my fork and looked around their dining room. The expensive light fixture overhead, the hardwood floors I'd helped finance, the lifestyle I'd enabled through anonymous gifts they'd never acknowledged. Why do you need my help if business is so good for you two? Derek's expression shifted slightly. Well, we've got most of our capital tied up in other investments right now. What investments? Sarah and Derek exchanged a look. Just various things, Sarah said quickly. Portfolio diversification. You know how it is? I don't, actually. What kind of investments? The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Derek took another sip of wine. Sarah straightened the papers in front of her. Does it matter? Derek said finally. The point is, this is a great opportunity for everyone involved. For everyone involved. Right. We get our business, you get a solid return on investment, and Sarah gets to work with her husband building something meaningful. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was beautiful, successful looking, confident. She was also treating me like a bank that had suddenly opened its doors after years of being closed. What if I said no? Sarah's smile faltered. Why would you say no? I'm just asking hypothetically. What if I decided not to invest in Derek's Delights? Derek's jaw tightened. That would be pretty selfish, don't you think? This is your daughter's future we're talking about. My selfish daughter's future. Dad! Sarah's voice went sharp. That's not fair. Isn't it? You call me broke and embarrassing at your wedding, hang up the phone when I try to explain why I helped you, and now you want $50,000 because I'm finally useful to your family. Derek stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You know what your problem is, Bob? You're bitter. You're a bitter old man who can't stand to see other people succeed. I'm bitter because I won't give you money? You're bitter because you've wasted your whole life, and now that you finally have a chance to do something meaningful, you're going to blow it because of your pride. Sarah reached for Derek's hand, trying to calm him down, but he pulled away. Sarah works hard, Bob. She deserves better than a father who holds grudges over every little thing. Every little thing. Yeah. So she got a little emotional at her wedding. So what? It was her special day. You should have been happy for her instead of keeping score. I stood up slowly, my joints aching from sitting in their uncomfortable dining room chairs. Thank you for dinner, Sarah. Dad, wait. Her voice had changed again, softer now. We don't have to decide anything tonight. Just think about it, okay? I'm done pretending to care about someone who won't help his own family, Derek called after me as I walked toward their front door. Sarah didn't contradict him. As I drove home, I realized they didn't want a father and grandfather either, they wanted a bank account with legs. Margaret Chen looked across her mahogany desk and said words that chilled my blood. Bob Sarah filed a petition claiming you're mentally incompetent. She wants guardianship of your assets. The call came on a Wednesday morning while I was reviewing maintenance reports for my property manager. Margaret's voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the concern underneath. Bob, I need you to come in today. We have a situation. What kind of situation? The kind that requires immediate action. Can you be here in an hour? Margaret's office occupied the corner of a downtown building I'd helped finance 15 years ago. Her law practice had grown steadily over the years, built on reputation and results. She specialized in estate planning for people who preferred to keep their business private. "Show me," I said when I arrived. Margaret slid a stack of legal documents across her desk. The letterhead was from Morrison, Blake & Associates, one of the city's most aggressive family law firms. "Petition for emergency guardianship," I read aloud. "Robert James Mitchell, alleged incapacitated person." The words swam on the page. Incapacitated. Mentally incompetent. Unable to manage financial affairs. Vulnerable adult in need of protection. "Sarah filed this 3 days ago," Margaret said. "She's requesting full guardianship of your person and your assets." I flipped through the pages, reading allegations that made my stomach turn, that I was living in squalor, that I made erratic financial decisions, like paying for weddings I couldn't afford, that I showed signs of dementia and confusion during family interactions. "She has a doctor's report," Margaret continued. "Dr. Harrison from Cedar Valley Medical. He's signed an affidavit stating that you exhibit symptoms consistent with early-stage Alzheimer's disease." I've never seen Dr. Harrison in my life. I know, that's the problem. The petition painted a picture of a confused old man making increasingly irrational choices with money he didn't really have. It described concerned family members worried about my welfare and my tendency to give away large sums to strangers. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was reading Sarah's sworn statement about my mental condition. "My father has become increasingly isolated and paranoid," her affidavit read. "He makes claims about owning properties and having substantial investments, but lives in a rundown apartment and dresses like he can barely afford basic necessities. He paid for my wedding through some kind of anonymous arrangement that he now claims was intentional, but which appears to have been the result of confusion and poor judgment. I am concerned that he is being taken advantage of by unscrupulous people who see him as an easy target." I set the papers down carefully. "She's trying to steal my life's work." "Yes, she is. And if we don't respond quickly, she might succeed." Margaret pulled out another folder. "Guardianship laws are designed to protect vulnerable adults, but they can be abused. Sarah has hired an aggressive firm, found a doctor willing to sign questionable paperwork, and filed in a county where the judges tend to err on the side of caution." "What does that mean?" "It means if we can't prove your competence quickly and convincingly, the court might grant her temporary guardianship while they investigate. Once she has legal control of your assets, it becomes much harder to get them back." I thought about Sunday dinner, the way Derek had spoken to me, the way Sarah had watched, evaluating my responses, taking notes on my behavior. The dinner invitation wasn't about the food truck. What dinner? 3 weeks ago, Sarah invited me for dinner. They asked for $50,000, but the whole thing felt staged, like they were testing me, seeing how I'd react. Margaret's expression darkened. "They were building a case. Every interaction, every conversation, they were documenting evidence of your alleged incompetence. How long have they been planning this?" "Based on the timeline here, probably since right after the wedding, maybe longer." I felt something cold settle in my chest. My daughter hadn't just discovered my wealth and gotten angry about it. She'd discovered my wealth and immediately started planning to take it. "What do we do?" Margaret smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. "We show them exactly how mentally competent you are." She pulled out a calendar and started making notes. First, we get you examined by real doctors, comprehensive cognitive testing, memory assessment, the works. Second, we document your financial competence. Meet us detailed records of your investments, your property management, your business decisions. How long do we have? The hearing is scheduled for next Friday. 6 days. 6 days to prove I wasn't the confused old man my daughter had painted in her legal documents. 6 days to show the court that I was capable of managing my own affairs. Margaret, there's something else. What? I want to change my estate plan. Sarah is currently set to inherit 50% of everything when I die. Margaret nodded slowly. Under the circumstances, that's probably wise. I want to leave everything to Emma, all of it. Are you sure? That's a significant decision to make while you're under emotional stress. I thought about Emma's voice over the satellite phone from Germany, the way she asked about my health, my happiness, my neighbor's well-being, the way she'd never once asked about money or inheritance or what she might gain from my death. I'm sure Sarah made her choice when she filed these papers. She chose to see me as an obstacle to my own money rather than as her father. Margaret made another note on her calendar. I'll prepare the paperwork. There's one more thing. I want to know exactly what Sarah and Derek have been doing financially. Every loan, every debt, every transaction. That's going to require a private investigator. Then hire one. I want to know everything. Margaret picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. James? It's Margaret Chen. I need a rush job on a family financial background check. As she spoke to the investigator, I read through Sarah's petition again. Each word was carefully chosen, each allegation precisely crafted to paint me as mentally incompetent. But that's when Margaret smiled and pulled out a folder marked contingency plan. She'd been expecting this. While Sarah was filing papers to declare me incompetent, I was transferring my entire fortune into an irrevocable trust. Margaret's contingency plan was thorough and brilliant. She'd anticipated Sarah's move months ago, back when I first told her about the wedding payment and Sarah's reaction. Rich parents with ungrateful children face this kind of legal challenge more often than you'd think, Margaret explained as we reviewed the trust documents. Adult children who feel entitled to their inheritance sometimes try to accelerate the process through guardianship claims. The irrevocable trust was already prepared, waiting only for my signature. Once executed, my assets would be legally protected from any guardianship proceeding. Sarah could gain control of my person, but she'd never be able to touch my money. Emma doesn't even know about this yet, I said. We'll call her after everything is finalized. Right now, the fewer people who know, the better. I signed the papers with steady hands, officially transferring $2.3 million in liquid assets and 17 rental properties into a trust that would benefit Emma exclusively. Sarah would inherit nothing, not because of revenge, but because she'd proven herself unworthy of the responsibility. While we worked, Margaret's investigator James Walsh called with preliminary findings about Sarah and Derek's financial situation. It's worse than we thought, Margaret said after hanging up. They're in debt up to their eyeballs. Credit cards maxed out, mortgage payments behind, car loans in default. The food truck story? Complete fantasy. They don't have money tied up in investments. They don't have any money at all. The $50,000 they wanted from you? That was to catch up on their bills and avoid bankruptcy. The pieces started falling into place. Sarah's expensive wedding had been funded partially by borrowed money, money they'd expected to repay once they gained control of my inheritance. The house, the cars, the lifestyle I'd admired during Sunday dinner, all of it was financed through debt. There's more, Margaret continued. Derek has a gambling problem. James found evidence of regular casino visits, online betting accounts, significant losses over the past 18 months. How significant? $78,000, maybe more. I felt my chest tighten. Sarah wasn't just financially irresponsible, she was married to a man who was actively destroying their future through gambling addiction. She doesn't know, does she? About Derek's gambling. James thinks she's in denial. She knows they have money problems, but she blames it on Derek's business investments and her own shopping habits. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. I underwent extensive cognitive testing with Dr. Patricia Williams, a neuropsychologist who specialized in competency evaluations, memory tests, reasoning assessments, psychological interviews, used every measure of mental acuity that existed. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Williams said after completing her evaluation, "your cognitive function is exceptional for someone your age. There's absolutely no evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any other condition that might impair your judgment." I also met with my accountant, my property manager, and my investment advisor to document my active involvement in financial decision-making. Every property purchase, every investment choice, every business decision over the past 5 years was thoroughly reviewed and documented. But the real shock came when James showed me photos of Sarah and Derek at the casino, spending money they'd borrowed against my future inheritance. The photographs were devastating. Sarah and Derek at slot machines, laughing over drinks they couldn't afford. Derek at a poker table, surrounded by chips representing money he didn't have. Sarah signing credit card receipts for cash advances that would be impossible to repay on their legitimate income. The dates on the photos told the story. They'd been gambling regularly since before the wedding, funding their addiction through borrowed money and credit card advances. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd started planning to access my inheritance the moment they realized I had money. "This photo was taken 2 days after your wedding," James explained, pointing to an image of Sarah and Derek toasting with champagne at the casino bar. "They went straight from your reception to the blackjack tables." The betrayal was complete. While I'd been sitting alone at their wedding, feeling ashamed of my thrift store suit and back table seating, they'd been planning to celebrate their windfall at a casino. "There's something else," James continued. "They've been telling people around town that you have Alzheimer's disease, preparing public opinion for the guardianship claim." "What kind of people?" "Neighbors, co-workers, people at their gym. Derek's been very specific about your supposed symptoms: memory loss, confusion, inappropriate financial decisions." Margaret leaned forward. "That's witness tampering. They've been building their case through a whisper campaign designed to make you look incompetent." I stared at the photographs, trying to reconcile the daughter I'd raised with the woman who could systematically destroy her father's reputation while planning to steal his life's work. "How much do they owe in total?" James consulted his notes. $215,000. Credit cards, personal loans, gambling debts, mortgage arrears. They're facing bankruptcy within 6 months if they don't get a significant cash infusion. And they thought my inheritance would solve their problems. "Your guardianship would solve their problems," Margaret corrected. "They'd have legal control of your assets while you were still alive. They could sell your properties, liquidate your investments, and pay off their debts without waiting for you to die." The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. Sarah wasn't just trying to inherit my money early, she was trying to steal my entire life while I watched helplessly from whatever care facility she'd choose for her mentally incompetent father. That's when Emma called from overseas, and what she told me about Sarah's phone calls made my blood run cold. Emma's voice cracked over the satellite phone. "Dad, Sarah's been calling me for months saying you have Alzheimer's and asking me to sign papers giving her power of attorney while I'm deployed." The call came at 2 in the morning my time, but Emma's schedule in Germany meant it was late afternoon for her. I'd been lying awake anyway, thinking about the photographs James had shown me, trying to understand how my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. "Dad, I hope I'm not waking you up." "Emma, sweetheart. It's fine, I was awake. I've been trying to figure out the time difference for weeks. I have something important to tell you, but I didn't want to worry you if it turned out to be nothing." My chest tightened. "What is it?" "It's about Sarah. Dad, she's been calling me almost every week since I deployed. At first I thought she was just being sisterly, keeping me connected to family while I'm so far away." Emma's voice carried that careful tone that military families learn, the way you deliver bad news when you can't be there to provide comfort in person. "But the calls got weird, Dad. She started telling me stories about you that didn't sound right. Said you were forgetting things, getting confused, making poor decisions with money. What kind of stories? She said you'd been giving money to strangers, that you bought lottery tickets with your grocery money, that you called her at 3 in the morning confused about where you were. None of it was true. I'd never bought a lottery ticket in my life, never called Sarah at inappropriate hours, never given money to strangers. Emma, I need you to know that. Dad, I know. I know Sarah was lying. The relief in my chest was immediate and overwhelming. You know, I've known you my whole life. Even if you did develop Alzheimer's, you wouldn't act the way Sarah described. You're too careful, too thoughtful, and the money stuff especially didn't make sense. Emma paused, and I could hear military radio chatter in the background. Plus, Sarah kept pushing me to sign legal papers. She said since I was your closest family member besides her, we needed to work together to protect you. She wanted me to give her power of attorney to handle your affairs while I'm deployed. But that wasn't the worst thing Sarah had done. She sent me fake medical documents. Dad, reports from a doctor I'd never heard of, claiming you'd been diagnosed with dementia. She said you were too proud to tell me yourself, but that I needed to know so we could make plans. What kind of plans? Moving you to a care facility, selling your apartment because you couldn't live alone anymore. She had it all mapped out, Dad. She said it would be easier for everyone if I just signed the papers now while I'm overseas, so she could handle everything without bothering me during my deployment. The manipulation was even more extensive than I'd realized. Sarah hadn't just lied to legal authorities and neighbors. She'd spent months systematically lying to her deployed sister, trying to gain power of attorney through deception and emotional manipulation. But I didn't sign anything. Something felt wrong about the whole situation. Sarah kept pushing for urgency, saying your condition was deteriorating quickly, but her stories didn't match the father I know. So you called me directly. I finally got enough leave time to make a decent phone call. I needed to hear your voice, needed to know for myself what was really going on. Emma's voice softened. Dad, you sound exactly like yourself. Sharp, thoughtful, completely normal. Nothing like the confused old man Sarah described. I felt tears building behind my eyes. Emma, there are some things I need to tell you about Sarah and about our family situation. I figured there might be. Sarah's stories never made sense, but I couldn't figure out what her angle was. Now I think I'm starting to understand. Over the next 40 minutes, I told Emma everything. The secret wealth I'd hidden for years. Sarah's reaction to discovering I'd paid for her wedding, the guardianship petition, and the fake medical reports, the gambling debts and the systematic lies Sarah had been spreading. Emma listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing the scope of Sarah's betrayal. Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have called you months ago when Sarah's stories first started sounding wrong. You couldn't have known. I should have trusted my instincts. I know you, and I know Sarah. I've watched her manipulate situations since we were kids. I just never thought she'd go this far. She's in serious financial trouble, Emma. She and Derek owe over $200,000. The guardianship petition isn't just about greed, it's about desperation. What do you need me to do? Without hesitation, without asking what might be in it for her, Emma was ready to help her father fight her sister's legal attack. I need you to document everything Sarah told you. Every lie, every fake document, every attempt to get you to sign papers. Margaret says your testimony could be crucial in proving Sarah's pattern of deception. Consider it done. I've been keeping notes about the phone calls because something felt off. I can send you everything. Emma, there's something else you need to know. I've changed my estate planning. Sarah was going to inherit half of everything when I died, but after this guardianship attempt, I've put everything in a trust for you. The silence stretched across the Atlantic Ocean between us. Dad, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Sarah made her choice when she filed legal papers claiming I'm mentally incompetent. She chose to see me as an obstacle to my own money rather than as her father. I don't care about inheritance, Dad. I just want you to be safe and happy. And that right there was the difference between my two daughters. Emma had just learned she was inheriting millions of dollars, and her first concern was still my well-being. "I know you don't care about the money, sweetheart. That's exactly why you deserve it." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen looking at family photographs, pictures of both girls at various ages, various celebrations, various milestones. In every photo, Emma was smiling genuinely, while Sarah was posed, performative, aware of how she looked. I'd been blind to the difference for years, but now I could see it clearly. I hung up the phone and looked at Margaret. "I want to file criminal charges. All of them." The decision came to me with perfect clarity as I set down the phone after talking to Emma. Sarah hadn't just attempted to gain guardianship through questionable legal means, she'd committed multiple felonies in the process. Margaret was still in her office at 9 p.m., working late to prepare for the guardianship hearing. When I called and told her about Emma's testimony, she immediately understood the implications. "Bob, this changes everything. Sarah's attempts to manipulate Emma into signing power of attorney papers based on false medical information, that's elder abuse and fraud. What does that mean? It means we're not just fighting a guardianship petition anymore. We're looking at criminal charges, multiple felonies." Margaret's voice carried a mix of professional excitement and personal anger. She'd been my lawyer for 15 years, and she'd watched Sarah treat me with increasing disrespect over that time. The fake medical documents alone constitute fraud and forgery. Add in the attempts to manipulate a deployed service member into signing legal papers based on false information, and we've got federal charges. Federal. Emma's military status makes this a federal case. Defrauding military families carries serious penalties. I felt something shift inside me. For months I'd been reacting to Sarah's manipulation, trying to protect myself from her schemes. Now I realized I could take offensive action. "I want her arrested." "Bob, are you sure? Once we file criminal charges, there's no going back. This will destroy any possibility of reconciliation with Sarah." I thought about all the chances I'd given Sarah to choose love over money, the wedding I'd funded anonymously, hoping she'd appreciate the gift without knowing its source, the modest lifestyle I'd maintained, hoping she'd love me for who I was rather than what I owned, the Sunday dinner invitation I'd accepted despite her cruelty, hoping she'd found some spark of affection for her father. At every opportunity, Sarah had chosen money over family. Sarah filed legal papers claiming I'm mentally incompetent so she could steal my life's work while I'm still alive. She lied to my deployed daughter for months, trying to manipulate her into signing fraudulent documents. She hired a corrupt doctor to provide false medical testimony. She's been spreading lies throughout our community to build public support for her theft. I paused, letting the weight of Sarah's betrayal settle between us. She didn't make one mistake in a moment of weakness. She planned and executed a systematic attack on my mental competence, my reputation, and my legal rights. That's not family conflict. That's criminal conspiracy. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "You're right, and honestly, if we don't file charges, she'll probably try this again with someone else. Maybe Emma after you're gone." "What do we do?" "I contact the district attorney's office first thing tomorrow morning. With Emma's testimony about the forged medical documents and the attempted fraud, plus James's evidence about Sarah's financial desperation, we have enough for multiple felony charges." "How long will it take?" "If the DA moves quickly, we could have arrest warrants by Friday. That's the same day as the guardianship hearing." The timing was perfect in a way that felt like justice. Sarah would walk into court expecting to gain control of my assets, and instead find herself facing criminal charges for trying to steal them. What about Derek? He's complicit in everything. The fake medical reports, the fraudulent loan applications, the lies to Emma. He participated in all of it. He'll face the same charges. That night, I sat in my modest apartment thinking about the path that had led us here. I'd tried to raise Sarah with good values, to teach her that character mattered more than wealth, that family bonds were stronger than financial considerations. Somewhere along the way I'd failed. Or maybe Sarah had simply chosen a different path than the one I'd tried to show her. Either way, the choice was no longer mine to make. Sarah had declared war on her own father, and I was finally ready to fight back. The police arrested Sarah at her morning yoga class. 23 charges including elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Her mugshot made the local news by noon. I wasn't there when it happened, but Margaret called me immediately afterward to describe the scene. Sarah had been in the middle of a downward-facing dog pose when two detectives walked into the wellness center and asked her to step outside. She tried to deny everything at first, Margaret told me. Claimed she had no idea what they were talking about, but when they mentioned the fake medical documents and the attempts to defraud Emma, she got very quiet very quickly. Derek was arrested an hour later at his office, a small insurance agency where he worked as a claims adjuster. His co-workers watched through the window as he was handcuffed in the parking lot and placed in the back of a police cruiser. The charges were extensive and damning. Elder abuse in the first degree, attempting to gain unauthorized control of an elderly person's assets through deception. Fraud in the first degree, using false documents to support legal proceedings. Forgery in the second degree, creating and distributing fake medical reports. Conspiracy to commit theft, planning to steal assets through fraudulent legal means. Federal mail fraud, using postal services to send fake documents to Emma. Attempted fraud of military personnel, specifically targeting a deployed service member for financial manipulation. By noon, Sarah's mugshot was on the local news website. The headline read, "Local woman arrested for alleged elder abuse scheme against father." The story was brief but devastating. Sarah Mitchell, 34, and her husband Derek Patterson, 36, were arrested today on charges related to an alleged scheme to gain fraudulent control of Mitchell's father's assets by claiming he was mentally incompetent. I watched the news coverage from my kitchen table, eating lunch and feeling no satisfaction. This wasn't victory. It was just the sad end of a relationship that had been poisoned by greed. But the community reaction was swift and unforgiving. Sarah's yoga instructor posted on Facebook about feeling completely betrayed by someone who had seemed so caring and family-oriented. Derek's co-workers started sharing stories about his money problems and erratic behavior. The couple's carefully constructed social media presence crumbled as friends and acquaintances learned the truth about their financial situation. Within hours, their world had collapsed completely. Margaret called again in the afternoon with an update from the prosecutor's office. "The DA is taking this very seriously, Bob. Elder abuse cases are a priority, especially when they involve this level of premeditation and deception." What happens next? Arraignment is Monday morning. Bail will probably be set pretty high. Will they make bail? With their financial situation? Probably not. Their assets are tied up in debt, and no one's going to loan money to people facing felony fraud charges. That evening, my phone started ringing. Neighbors who had heard Derek's lies about my mental condition called to apologize and offer support. The grocery store clerk who had watched Derek speak to me like I was senile apologized for not intervening. My property manager called to congratulate me on finally fighting back against those parasites. The truth about Sarah and Derek's financial crimes had spread through our small community like wildfire, and public opinion had shifted completely in my favor. But the call that surprised me most came from Derek's mother. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Patricia Patterson, Derek's mother." I remembered her from the wedding, an elegant woman in her 60s who had seemed politely distant during our brief introduction. "I just saw the news and I wanted to call and apologize. Not just for Derek, but for my whole family." Her voice was shaky, embarrassed. "We knew Derek had money problems, but we had no idea we never imagined he'd try something like this. Mrs. Patterson, you don't need to apologize for your son's actions." "Yes, I do. Derek has been lying to us too, Mr. Mitchell. He told us you were mentally impaired and that Sarah was trying to help you. We actually thought they were doing something noble." She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. "My husband and I are so ashamed. We raised Derek better than this. We don't know how he became someone who could defraud his own father-in-law. People make choices, Mrs. Patterson. Sometimes those choices surprise everyone. Is there anything we can do? Any way we can help make this right? Her genuine remorse was touching, but there wasn't anything she could do to fix what Derek and Sarah had broken. Just take care of yourself and your family. This isn't your fault. After I hung up, I realized that Derek's family had been victims too, manipulated and lied to, just like Emma and me. But the final blow came when the bank called to foreclose on Sarah's house, the same house I'd helped her buy 5 years ago. The foreclosure notice arrived by certified mail on Thursday morning, 2 days before Sarah and Derek's arraignment. Margaret brought it to my apartment along with other legal documents we needed to review. Their mortgage payments are 4 months behind, Margaret explained. The bank filed foreclosure proceedings 3 weeks ago, but Sarah and Derek never responded. They probably hoped to resolve their financial problems through the guardianship scheme before losing the house. I looked at the foreclosure notice, remembering the day Sarah had called me excitedly about finding her dream home. She'd been so proud of the mortgage approval, so excited about building equity and establishing herself in a good neighborhood. What she hadn't known was that I'd provided the down payment through another anonymous gift, a first-time buyer's assistance program that Margaret had arranged through a local nonprofit. The irony is brutal, Margaret continued. If Sarah had just been honest about needing help, if she'd asked for assistance instead of trying to steal your entire fortune, you probably would have helped her save the house. She was right. Despite everything Sarah had done, if she'd come to me honestly and asked for help with the mortgage, I probably would have paid it off. Not because I approved of her lifestyle or her husband's gambling, but because she was still my daughter. The house will go to auction next month. With their criminal charges pending and their credit destroyed, they'll never qualify for another mortgage. Sarah would lose everything. Her house, her reputation, her freedom, and her relationship with her father, all because she'd chosen to steal rather than ask, to lie rather than humble herself, to destroy rather than build. The foreclosure was the final domino falling in a chain reaction Sarah had started when she called me broke and embarrassing at her own wedding. As Margaret gathered up the legal papers, I realized that Sarah's punishment wasn't something I had imposed on her. It was something she had chosen for herself through a series of increasingly desperate and destructive decisions. Justice wasn't something I was doing to Sarah. It was something Sarah had done to herself. Sarah sat across from me in the county jail visiting room wearing an orange jumpsuit, asking me one last time to save her. I pulled out a single photograph and slid it across the table. The visit took place on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 days after Sarah's arrest and 3 days before her arraignment. Margaret had advised against it, arguing that anything Sarah said could be used to manipulate me or compromise our legal position. But I needed closure. I needed to look my daughter in the eyes one final time and understand how we'd arrived at this point. The county jail visiting room was exactly what you'd expect. Midas gray walls, fluorescent lighting, plastic chairs bolted to the floor. I sat at a small table waiting for Sarah to be brought in, holding a manila envelope that contained a single photograph. When the door opened and Sarah walked in, I barely recognized her. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back with a rubber band. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on her frame, making her look younger and more vulnerable than she had in years. Her face was puffy from crying, her eyes red and desperate. She sat down across from me and immediately started talking. "Dad, thank God you came. I've been so scared and I didn't know if you'd... I need your help, Dad. I need you to call your lawyer and ask her to drop the charges." Her voice was different, smaller, more childlike. The confident, entitled woman who had called me broke at her wedding was gone, replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. "I know you're angry and I know I made mistakes, but this has gone too far. I could go to prison for years, Dad. Years. Derek's already talking about pleading guilty to get a reduced sentence." She reached across the table as if to take my hands, but stopped when she saw my expression. "Dad, I'm your daughter. You raised me. You know I'm not a criminal. I made some bad decisions when I was scared about money." I looked at her carefully, studying her face for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding of what she'd done. All I saw was panic and self-pity. Sarah, do you understand why you're here? Because of a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. Dad, the guardianship thing. I was just trying to help you. Derek and I were worried about your judgment, and we thought... Stop. The word came out harder than I'd intended, but Sarah's lies were already starting. Even now, sitting in jail facing years in prison, she was still trying to manipulate me with false concern and manufactured justifications. Sarah, you filed legal papers claiming I was mentally incompetent so you could steal my money. You hired a corrupt doctor to provide false testimony. You spent months lying to Emma, trying to trick her into signing fraudulent documents while she was deployed overseas serving her country. Sarah's face crumpled. It wasn't like that, Dad. Then what was it like? We were desperate, okay? Derek owes money to some very bad people, and I was scared of what might happen if we couldn't pay them back. When I found out you had money, I thought maybe you could help us, but you were being so stubborn and selfish. Selfish. Not selfish, I didn't mean, Dad. You have millions of dollars sitting in accounts while your daughter is about to lose her house. How is that fair? And there it was. Even now, even sitting in jail, Sarah still believed she was entitled to my money simply because she was my daughter. Sarah, you never asked me for help with your house, because I knew you'd say no. You'd want to lecture me about responsibility and living within my means, and I didn't have time for that. Derek's problems were immediate. I pulled the photograph from the envelope and slid it across the table. Sarah looked down at the image, her wedding reception, the moment she'd raised her champagne glass and called me broke while 200 guests laughed. Her face was radiant with cruel satisfaction, her eyes bright with the joy of putting her father in his place. "Do you remember this moment?" I asked. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the photograph. "Dad, I was nervous, and I said something stupid." "You meant every word, Sarah. This photograph captures exactly how you feel about me. You're happy, you're laughing, you're enjoying the moment when you publicly humiliated your father." She stared at the photograph, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, she was completely quiet. "This image will forever represent our relationship," I continued. "Your cruelty and my silent pain. The moment when I realized that my daughter saw me as an embarrassment rather than a person worthy of love. Dad, please don't do this to me. I know I said horrible things, but I was young and stupid, and you're 34 years old, Sarah. You're not young. You're not stupid. You're entitled and greedy and willing to destroy your own father to get what you want." The tears started then, real tears that seemed to come from genuine despair rather than calculated manipulation. "I'm going to lose everything, Dad. My house, my marriage, my future. Derek's family won't even talk to us anymore. Our friends have all turned their backs on us. I don't have anyone left except you." But that wasn't even the worst thing she'd done. "Sarah, do you know what hurts me most about this whole situation?" She looked up at me through her tears, hopeful that I might be softening. "It's not the lies or the fraud or the attempts to steal my money. It's the fact that you never loved me at all. You've been planning to take my inheritance for years, just waiting for me to die or become incompetent enough for you to justify stealing from me." "That's not true, Dad. I do love you." "No, you don't. You love my money. You love what I can provide for you, but you don't love me." I stood up slowly, my joints aching from the uncomfortable plastic chair. "Sarah, I've put everything in a trust for Emma. When I die, you'll inherit nothing. Not because I want to punish you, but because you've proven yourself incapable of handling the responsibility that comes with wealth." Her face went white. "Dad, you can't do that. I'm your daughter." "Yes, you are. And I failed you somewhere along the way. I raised a daughter who thinks she's entitled to steal from her own father. That's my failure as a parent." I picked up the photograph and put it back in the envelope. "But your choices as an adult are your own responsibility. You chose greed over love. You chose manipulation over honesty. You chose to see me as an obstacle to money rather than as your father." Sarah was sobbing now, ugly, desperate sobs that echoed off the concrete walls. Dad, please don't leave me like this. Please don't give up on me. I looked at her one last time. My daughter, my little girl, the child I'd once carried on my shoulders and read bedtime stories to. Somewhere inside that orange jumpsuit was the toddler who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and couldn't trust. Goodbye, Sarah. I walked away from my daughter forever, feeling not triumph but profound sadness. The drive home took me past Sarah's house, where a foreclosure sign now stood in the front yard, past the community center where she'd held her wedding reception, past the life she'd built on borrowed money and broken promises. When I got home, I called Emma in Germany. Dad? How did it go? It's over, sweetheart. All of it. Are you okay? I looked around my modest apartment, at the simple life I'd chosen, at the peace that comes from living honestly. I'm sad, Emma, but I'm also relieved. For the first time in years, I don't have to wonder whether Sarah loves me or just wants my money. Now I know. I'm sorry, Dad. Don't be sorry for your sister's choices. Just be grateful that you chose differently. 6 months later, I got a letter from prison. I threw it away unopened. Sarah was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Derek received 6 years due to his more extensive criminal history and his role as the primary architect of the fraud scheme. They divorced while awaiting sentencing, each blaming the other for their legal troubles. The house sold at foreclosure auction for 60 cents on the dollar. Sarah's wedding dress, still in its preservation box, was among the personal belongings sold to pay off creditors. Emma returned from her deployment and immediately flew home to spend 2 weeks with me. She expressed no interest in the inheritance I'd left her, focusing instead on my health and happiness. We spent long afternoons talking about her mother, sharing memories that Sarah had never bothered to collect. I started using my wealth more openly but carefully. I funded a scholarship program for children of deployed military personnel. I renovated a community center in Linda's memory. I helped several neighbors with medical bills and home repairs, gifts given without conditions or expectations. I never spoke of Sarah again, having learned that blood doesn't guarantee love, and that sometimes the cruelest betrayals come from those closest to our hearts. The apartment felt peaceful now, free from the anxiety of wondering when Sarah would call demanding something or criticizing my choices. I could finally be myself. Males wealthy or modest, generous or careful, successful or simple, without fear of judgment from someone who should have loved me unconditionally. Sometimes I thought about the little girl who used to help me feed ducks at the park, who would fall asleep in my lap during Sunday afternoon movies, who once made me a Father's Day card that said, "My dad is the best dad in the whole world." That little girl had grown up to become someone who saw her father as an obstacle to money rather than a person worthy of love. I grieved for her every day, but I never regretted the choices that led to her imprisonment. Sarah had chosen her path, and I had finally chosen mine. The path led to peace, to honesty, to relationships built on love rather than financial advantage. It led to Emma's laughter during our phone calls, to neighbors who waved when they saw me walking, to a community center full of children who would never know their benefactor's name. It led away from Sarah and toward a life where I could finally be both wealthy and worthy, generous and respected, successful and genuinely loved. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.